Morning everyone and welcome to the internet. So what we're going to be doing in our triple biology lesson today is having a look at biotic and abiotic factors. So hopefully by the end of this lesson you'll be able to tell me what they actually are and how they will affect different communities. So to start us off, as always, you've got your questions just to recap on our previous work. So those of you with target grades up to a grade 5, it's the questions on the left. Those of you with a target grade of 5 or up, then it's on the right. So I'll give you a few minutes just to have a go at those questions in your book. Okay then, let's have a little check of our answers. Again, as usual, if you've got it right, give yourself a tick. If it's wrong, give yourself a cross and correct it. So for the up to grade 5, first of all, we should have got pondweed with an arrow pointing towards the pond snail, pointing towards the fish, towards the heron. So you get 1 mark if you've got the sequence of the actual organisms, and a 2nd mark if you got the arrows pointing in the right direction. Second one, our part A, the producer in that food chain is pondweed, give yourself a tick for that. Secondary consumer is the fish, a tick for that one. And trophic level 3 is also the fish. So tick all of those if you got them right and add up your scores. For those who did the grade 5 and up, we were looking to see the impact of removing the slugs. So first thing we could have said is that the number of grasshoppers would decrease. Now that gets you 1 mark if you said grasshoppers decrease. 2nd mark if you said because the shrews have no slugs to eat, so they're eating more of them. Next mark is for saying that the number of beetles could decrease, and the reason for that one is because the shrews have no slugs to eat, so they'll be eating more of them. Again, 2 marks for that. Next one is for saying the number of spiders could decrease, and the reasoning for that is that the shrews and the mice have no slugs to eat, so they're eating more of the spiders. And the last thing to talk about is the grass, and in theory the grass could increase, a mark for that bit, because there's less slugs eating it, a mark for that bit. So add up your scores and let me know in the chat window how we did. So on your screen at the moment then, what we've got are a collection of images that are actually linked together. So in the bottom left we've got a sun bear, in the middle we've got an orangutan, and then in the bottom right a series of products that you would normally be able to find in a supermarket. Maybe not so much at the moment, but usually you would be able to. So what I want you to do, jot down in your book what links those images. I'm only going to give you about 20 seconds to do that. Now, all of those images are actually linked by the production of palm oil. So all of those products you can see in the bottom right corner do contain palm oil. And then what we find is palm oil is being produced in the areas that were the habitats of orangutans and sun bears. So we're clearing vast areas of their natural habitat in order to have these palm oil plantations to basically give us the stuff we've become accustomed to. Now, there is a really good BBC documentary that I'd suggest you all take a moment to watch a bit later on after this video. So I'll put the link in the description box underneath, but I do suggest you watch it so you're more aware of what's going on in the bigger world. To start us off then, what I want you to do is, in your books, have a go at writing me a definition for a biotic factor. So just think about what the word biotic might mean. Just going to give you 30 seconds to do this. Write your own definitions in your books for me. If we break down the word biotic to those first three letters, bio, think about where we've heard of bio before. Biology, the study of living things. Okay, so biotic is going to be the living factors. So what we're looking at here are things like the organisms. How many? What types are they? What competition is there between them? It'll be things like what plants are present. So anything that is a living factor is a biotic factor. And what I've given you at the top of your screen there is just a visual representation of this. So when you come to actually write out your revision notes, or however you do it, flashcards, then actually adding little images that just help trigger that link in your mind can really help out. So obviously on that one you can see I've put little snails and plants and things like that, anything that's living. So what I need you to do is, in your books, write down the definition of biotic factors, write down the examples I've given you there, and then I want you to make a list of factors which organisms would compete for. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to get that done. In terms of what our organisms are going to be competing for, then you can think about things like food, space. If we're talking about animals, then breeding partners as well. So anything at all that there could be in limited supply, then our organisms have to compete for it. Okay, so obviously make sure you've got at least 3 written down there, and the 3 I'd suggest you have are food, space, and breeding partners as a good go-to set. We now know that a biotic factor is a living factor. So what I want you to have a go at doing now, and hopefully applying that little bit of logic that I know you've all got somewhere, maybe deep down, is what the abiotic factors are. So in your books, just write me a definition for what abiotic factors are. Again, I'll just give you about 30 seconds to do that. When we're talking about abiotic factors, we are talking about the non-living or the physical factors. So again, you can see I've changed the abiotic word at the top to represent these non-living or physical factors. So it's things like your temperature, the pH, the amount of rainfall, the humidity. Any of those things are not living, they are physical factors. So again, in your books, make sure you've got the definition and those couple of examples jotted down for me. I'll just give you about 20 seconds to get that done. Now, there are 4 of these abiotic physical factors that we're going to look at in a bit more detail today. So light intensity, temperature, the moisture level, and soil pH. So what I want you to do is just take a few minutes now in your books just to suggest how each of those 4 factors would affect a community. So I'm just going to give you about 4 minutes, so a minute for each, just to suggest how each of those abiotic factors would affect a community. Off you go. What we're going to do then is have a look at each of these in turn. So what we've got are a few sentences that I'd suggest you write down in your books and obviously fill in any blank spaces I've left for you. So the first factor we're going to consider is the light intensity. Now, light is required for a really important process in plants, which hopefully we will all remember the name of, and we've got our little link there. So I'm just going to give you about 3 minutes to write those sentences, fill in the blanks, and then we'll go through it to make sure you've got it all right. So make sure you've got the right words filled in here. Hopefully you do remember that light is required for plants to carry out photosynthesis. So in order to actually carry out the conversion of our carbon dioxide and water to the glucose and the oxygen, we need that energy from sunlight. So light is required for photosynthesis. What we then find then is that the greater the amount of light available, then the greater the success of our plant, because it means that our plant is going to be able to carry out a greater rate of photosynthesis, meaning it's going to be able to make more glucose, which it needs to then build all those new cells. However, what we will find is that not all plants have been created equally. So if we actually look around outside, then we will notice that it's not just in the really bright sunny areas that plants are able to grow. They still grow in those shady zones. And the reason for that is that plants have actually evolved to grow successfully in different light intensities. So that's why if you're planting up your garden, then you can buy plants that are really good in the shade versus ones that are really good in bright sunlight. They've evolved in different ways. And a really good example of one that's evolved to grow in quite low light intensity is rhubarb. And you can see a picture of rhubarb in the bottom left there. Now, the leaves on rhubarb are really quite large. And the reason they're big is because this is a plant that's actually evolved to grow in shady areas. So by having a much larger surface area of the leaf, it can trap a lot more of that light energy in order to carry out photosynthesis. So I'd suggest as an example for our evolution, we can put rhubarb, which has evolved to grow in low light intensities by having large leaves. The second factor we're going to consider is temperature. Now, temperature is really important in living things because it affects the enzymes. And hopefully we remember that inside living things, then we've got a huge number of these metabolic reactions that are needed for life to carry on. And enzymes are what's controlling a huge number of these reactions. Now, temperature affects enzymes, and we looked at that back in B1. And what we actually find is that if we've got these warmer temperatures, then enzymes will be working faster, which means reactions will happen faster. And what we will find is that we get rapid development of plants when they're in these warm temperatures, because their metabolic reactions are happening faster, which then just gives them everything they need. Now, you've got a little question at the bottom for you to have a go at, so I'm just going to give you literally 2 minutes to get those points written down and answer that question. Why do lizards lie on rocks in the morning? And you may have noticed them if you've ever been to really nice hot countries, places like Mexico and all of this. Then first thing in the morning around the hotel resorts, all of these lizards are just sitting out on those paths and drives. Why are they doing that? So get your answers in your books. Hopefully we pointed out the fact that lizards are cold-blooded creatures. Now, what that means is that they rely on the air temperature around them and the sunlight to actually warm up their bodies. So when they first get up in the morning, the first thing they're going to do is find a nice sunny hot spot to sit, soak up that heat in order to then get their enzymes going. Our third important physical factor or abiotic factor is the moisture. Now, hopefully we do know that if we have a lack of water in either plants or animals, then if we don't get enough, we're going to die. Same thing with plants. If you don't water them, they will die if they have a lack of water. Now, what we actually find is that if we're thinking about plants, they go through this process known as wilting first of all. So when there's a lack of water, they will wilt. See if you can have a go at explaining why that happens. I'm just going to give you about 90 seconds to do that. So let's see if we got this right then. The reason that plants wilt is because the water is needed to keep their cells turgid. So think back to that work we did on osmosis. Plants have a plant cell wall and the water moves into that vacuole in the middle and it causes it to push out against the cell wall, making them turgid. If there's not enough water, the vacuole can't do that. The cell wall therefore isn't being pushed upon and therefore it will wilt. If you need a reminder on that, then obviously stop by a bit later on for the lesson I'm doing on osmosis. The final abiotic factor we're going to look at is the pH of the soil. Now, what we actually find then is the reason pH is of concern to us is that it's going to actually affect the biological activity in the soil. So that means it's going to affect what's able to actually live there first of all. But in addition to that, it also affects what minerals are available in what quantities. So varying the pH is going to determine what can actually survive in those different soils. And again, what we'll find is you'll buy plants for different soils. So you'll get plants that are designed for acid soils and others that will grow better in alkaline soils. So if you've got acidic soil, things like rhododendrons and ferns are what you should be growing. Whereas if you've got an alkaline soil, then things like cucumber and cauliflower are going to do really well. There is one plant that I think is really quite cool in all honesty, and that is the hydrangea. Now this is the plant that you'll see in loads of people's gardens around the UK. So you've got a picture of it at the bottom there, and the reason this plant is actually really quite cool is that when it grows in different soil pHs, then the colour of the flowers is different. And you can see down there you'll get this very deep blue colour in pHs of about 4.5, whereas if you've got a pH in your soil of about 7, then it's a really pink colour plant. So what we can see is that the soil pH does affect what can grow there. Make sure those points are written down. If you need a bit more time, hit pause on the video now. Just before we finish with our plenary today, we need to know how we can measure these different abiotic factors. So we've looked at 4 of them: light intensity, moisture, pH and temperature. I want you to see if you can name the sensor for each one and name the unit of measurement for it. So I'm just going to give you a little over a minute to get that done. So let's make sure we've got these filled in correctly. The sensor for light intensity is a light meter, and the unit of measurements is lux, L-U-X. For moisture, then our sensor is a humidity sensor, and that's usually measured in percent. pH is going to be a pH probe, and it doesn't have units. We just write pH as the number. And then our temperature would be a thermometer, and that would be measured in degrees Celsius. So make sure they're all filled in your table. So just to finish off for today then, we've got our plenary questions. So those of you with target grades up to a 5, it's the 2 on the left. Grade 5 and up, it's the 2 on the right. So I'll leave those up there for a few seconds, but it's probably going to be best to pause the video today so you can really have a go at doing this. As always, the answer to the plenary plus some extra work for you to be getting on with can be found on my website, and the link is on the screen there for you. So our next Year 10 triple biology lesson will be on Monday the 20th of April, because we're going to have a bit of a break for Easter, and then Monday the 13th is a bank holiday, so we're going to keep that as part of our holiday. So we'll be back on Monday the 20th. So enjoy the time off, and I will see you hopefully on the 20th.